Because I feel like just existing as a woman is kind of dangerous in society. Like if you're walking alone in like a bad part of town. Like,
I mean, it's actually more dangerous to exist as a man.
yeah, I think men actually do get more violently targeted, but it's always...
Men are more likely to be victims of violent crime, so...
But
yeah, of violent crimes for sure, but I think when it... Oh,
I think it depends.
Yes. Okay. I just want to know who is committing these crimes, like, against the men?
Men.
That's kind of almost victim blaming. What does it matter what the gender of the perpetrator is?
I'm just saying, like, it just feels like men, the conversation of safety and the world not being safe, it's like just comes back to men sometimes.
It's not because of men, it's a very small proportion of men who commit these violent crimes. So,
and they've existed since the beginning of time, and that's never going to change.
It's with almost any group of people, though. For any stats figures, it's almost always a small group, but usually, like, if you divide by race or by gender or whatever, then there's a larger percentage within each categorized group in some as opposed to others, which makes these disparities seem large.
Yeah, I think when people say, oh, it's more dangerous for men, it really depends on how you qualify that. Because I feel like if...
Just across the board, generally speaking, violent crime. Go ahead.
Okay. Because I was going to say, I think women do a lot of risk de-escalation as much as they can. So if women took the same actions as men do, then you might see similar numbers of violence. But what ends up happening is that women from a young age are socialized to... okay, don't be out too late at night, or if you are, be with like a bunch of friends, and like always like be careful walking to the parking lot, and have the keys with you and the pepper spray and the 911 ready to call. And if a guy like flirts with you or comes up with you, think about all the ways that he can harm you. So I'm not saying that men aren't larger victims of, like, let's say street violence, for example, but I wonder if those numbers would change if women were more casual like men are.
I think it just has to do with proximity, and then also, like, you have gang violence is going to be like one of the main, and so it's usually gangs fighting against each other tend to be men. But like also, like, if you break it down by race, like, black people tend to hurt black people, whereas white people hurt white people, Asian people hurt Asian people, women hurt women, men hurt men. Just like it,
I would say way more men hurt women, but...
So you'll see more men hurting women than women hurting men, but men attack men more than men attack women.
Yeah, that's true.
I think I think it's a society that is the reason for this.
Systemic thing.
I wouldn't say it's just men. I would just say it's how they were
raised.
Is it raised or wired? Like...
nature or nurture?
I don't think any of us were like... have much of a chance with the way that the system is set up.
Yeah, it's largely based on like socioeconomic conditions too.
I feel like I agree with that, because I also was born and raised in China, from Beijing for 15 years. I've never actually experienced such high amount of violence where I grew up. Maybe you could say it's communism, you could say it's like the government controls everything, but like this much amount of violence is kind of unheard of almost. I was like pretty shocked when I got here, to be honest.
So sorry, you were saying in Beijing there's less violence than in America?
I think it's simply because the government has more control over
So wait,
there.
do you prefer communism then?
I don't have a preference. I think I actually prefer here, but because people here can actually have their own voice, have their opinions, and then like be who they are, I think that could potentially lead to like more violence.
Have you experienced with the communist government like governmental violence in China?
I've not personally experienced it, but I've heard things. What's that face?
Brian?
I have no idea what the fuck this has to do with dating, but okay. So we're at...
You're talking about violence.
You were making the point, Pixie, that women, because the way they are raised to be more aware of risk.
Like risk adverse, yeah.
Okay. There was another part that you said after that I had a point on, but it's evaded me. What did you say?
She was saying that if women are brought up to be cautious around men, which is why they potentially have less conflicts with men than when you were saying that men get attacked more frequently than women.
But you could also argue that men have there's something within a lot of men which is like a white knight thing, where it's like told never to hit a woman. In fact, I think women have certain privileges on the street. For example, like you, for example, let's say you're walking in some bar or nightclub district, and a guy comes up to you and slaps you across the face. There are totally strange men that will intervene on your behalf and essentially be your bodyguards for free, that will defend you. However, if I just get slapped in the face by some dude and he starts trying to fuck me up, nobody's coming to save me. So I think that's actually a privilege that women have. You basically, in a public area, you basically have male bodyguards that will intervene on your behalf that are total strangers.
I don't know. Okay. Like, I agree to a certain extent, especially like if a woman were to slap you, I highly doubt that you'll have any interveners. But if a random man slaps you, I think you'll have a high likelihood that you're also going to have strangers intervene.
No.
And then also there's been
Police,
multiple issues, specifically during COVID, like when they started letting the trains run again, where women were being SA'd on the trains in New York, and sometimes for many, many stops, and passerbyers were videotaping it, and nobody was doing anything to help these women. So women do experience that as well. Yeah, I'll agree with you that in general, strangers are more likely to help a woman being beaten than a man being beaten by a woman. But women definitely experience times where strangers will not help them.
I'm not saying that there's never a situation where a woman is being physically assaulted by a man and that it's impossible that the guy doesn't intervene. However, I would say it's very likely, if there's other men around seeing a woman being beaten by a man, they are very likely to not just intervene, but beat the fucking shit out of the guy who's beating on the woman. Whereas if I'm getting attacked by another man, I don't know why you flip the genders. If I'm getting attacked by another man, it's very, very unlikely that other men are going to intervene to stop.
And just to say something on that, so for example, when that situation does arise, when a woman is being beaten by a man and there aren't any defenders, oftentimes there could be missing context from the situation. So did you guys hear about the woman who got bricked in the face recently? She literally got...
we talked about that. Yeah.
Oh, you don't want to talk about it? We don't have to. I was just using it as an example because she was literally saying men weren't standing up for me, men are pussies, they're cowards, this and that, trying to paint this narrative, but there was a lot more to the context than...
Mike Davis donated $100.
Hold on just a sec.
People
Thank you,
be
Mike
thinking
Davis.
I'm anti-women when the fact is I'm anti-everybody. Most men are completely useless working dead-end jobs just to throw that bread at some thought. But they're self-aware and know they're losers. 300+ pound women think they special. Crazy.
All right, Mike Davis. There you go. The resident. He's on something. Thank you, Mike Davis. Appreciate it.
I think that although in theory it sounds like, oh yeah, like, men will be valiant and stand up for women, there's a reason why women are even given advice like, hey, if you're being assaulted or if some like strange guy's trying to attack you, instead of yelling like help, like I'm being SA'd, instead they say you should scream fire, because like there is like the bystander effect. There is a lot of people, both men and women, in the face of atrocities freeze or think that somebody else called the police, somebody else is going to do something about it regardless of gender.
I kind of want to talk about why men defend women when they see them being harmed on the streets. I think most of the time, like the average woman's height is like 5'4" versus the average male height is 5'9", and there's a lot more muscle mass when you're a guy in general. And I feel like people tend to want to defend people who are
tiny,
like just smaller. Like it's like if you see someone literally like beating the shit out of a kid, or someone who is that cannot physically defend themselves, then you're more inclined to help. If someone's beating on an old person in a wheelchair, he's like, hey, stop that. So.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think if there's a disparity in size or strength, I think there's perhaps, even if it's two men, there might be a greater likelihood of intervention. And certainly your examples with if it's someone who's elderly, a child, that's a fair point. You said you had a question for me before you went up to...
Oh yeah, I was wondering, how many people you share your location with on your phone. Like just Find My Friends if you have an iPhone or Android.
How many people? I don't think I share my location with anybody.
So I want to bring up that most women share their locations with other women and friends just as like a primary safety. Like, hey, if I go on this date, this is where I'm at. Something could happen, and it's just we're taught to always be cautious because things can happen, and then we get blamed if something does happen. A lot of times, like if someone drugs our drink, or if someone ends up assaying us, like it's typically like, oh, we didn't take enough precaution. You always have to have an out, like, hey, like I'm right here, come pick me up, whatever.
Okay.
Yeah. It was.
All right. Okay. Let's fucking talk about something else.